much, Emma, for that. Okay, I'm going to just pop them up again here. And okay, great. So this training is basically, it comes from my experience as a journalist, and I now work as a media publicity mentor to businesses and coaches. So when I worked as a journalist for over 10 years now, good bit over 10 years, I always noticed that there was a gap between what a journalist needs to get from someone who wants their story published and what was sent in. And oftentimes it took a lot of work to get to the story. So what I really want to do in this training is give you, some valuable insights and tips. So we've got a good few people on now. So I think we're going to just get started. So, and we're all good to go on my side. Okay, so the first thing I kind of want you to think about is, what you're going to learn to fix on this training. And I know, from my experience now being on the media publicity mentor side, that, you can be frustrated when you're contacting a journalist over and over, or contacting various journalists, and you just feel defeated. You feel frustrated because they're not getting back to you. And you kind of don't really know why. So you try again, maybe with the same story or with a different story, and you think, okay, maybe this time I might get coverage. And yet again, sadly, you don't get a response. So what I'm hoping you're going to learn from this training, now it is quite hard to get a lot into 45 minutes, but what I'm going to try to do is to, lessen those feelings for you a bit. And by the end of this training, I'm going to hope that you're going to have the knowledge to make changes to your media publicity efforts, so you can be the one that the journalist replies to, and you can kind of not feel, defeated anymore about your efforts. And just to let you know as well, especially now with COVID just taking over, the news agenda, journalists are getting a huge amount of emails. Like before COVID, journalists could be getting upwards on 200 to 300 emails a day. And, you need to be able to kind of stand out a bit from that. So I'm going to just give you a couple of things that you can try, certainly straight after this training or the next time you go to contact a journalist. And I'm really hoping that it's going to help. Okay. So to get the most from this training, I'm sure a lot of you have been on trainings before, to try and watch it on a desktop if you can, to silence your phone, even though I know that can be hard, and to close out any other tabs that you have, because maybe it might be affecting your internet connection. Okay, so at the end, I'm going to be giving you all a checklist. And this is a checklist that you can use the next time you go to pitch a story to a journalist. And basically, it's a checklist with various things inside that you should look for in your content the next time you put it together. So things like, is it newsworthy? Is it relevant? What are my photos like? Are they newsy photos, or are they, quite staged photos? Now, I'm not going to go into photos a lot in this training, but excuse me, this is a checklist. So if you stay to the end, I'll be emailing this to you. And certainly it will be useful to you the next time you go to send an email into a journalist looking for coverage. Okay, so a little bit about me. Now, I don't want to dwell too long about me, but I'm sure there's some of you here that absolutely know nothing about me. So I just want to give you a little bit about my background. So my parents were absolutely, fascinated by the news, and they were, the first thing that happened, even before the kettle went on in the morning, was the radio went on to get the news at 9, the news at 8, to find out what was going on in the world. And say when major events happened, like say Princess Diana's death, 9/11, the first thing that would have to happen the next day would be to get at least 2 major newspapers to read about what was happening. So this is the kind of house I grew up in. And my parents were fascinated by television presenters. Gay Byrne was one that, we never ever missed the Late Late Show. And for those of you that don't know the Late Late Show, it's an Irish show that's broadcast every Friday evening. And I think, if my memory serves me correctly, it's the longest running chat show in the world, but I can stand corrected on that one. I'm over 10 years, I don't work as a journalist now, but I've spent over 10 years working in journalism, and I've worked in various counties, starting off in my own home county of Galway, and I did a detour. I went to Sligo, Mayo, Cork, Dublin, London, Boston, New York. The last three on those lists were freelance work that I did from my base in Ireland. And I started in Galway, and actually I ended in Galway. So I kind of did a full loop and ended back where I started. So that's kind of nice. Then I have done some work for Hewlett-Packard and Neurotech, which are two major companies in Galway. And I've now transitioned and made the leap across just this year. Some would say it wasn't the best year to decide to do it, but here we are. As a media publicity mentor, and I've contributed to articles on Medium, and I am a writer for Prowly, which is a website. You can go check it out, actually, if you want. It's the website for PR professionals and people that are kind of looking for tips on how to grow their visibility by getting featured in the press. So that's just a little bit about me. So when I worked as a media of the business, and that worked sometimes, and it didn't work other times. And I was like, okay, what's missing here? And it's funny, sometimes you finish one job and you start another job, and you kind of compartmentalize them, and you don't kind of see the links sometimes between one job and another. And for me, the most important asset I had helping people get media publicity was the fact that I was a journalist and that I sat in newsrooms for over 10 years. So I was like, okay, I need to put my journalist hat back on so I can help people better. So I sat down one night and I thought, okay, look, I'm just going to think about this now in terms of, what does the journalist want? What did I want when I used to sit in the newsroom? So, and then it spiraled. So the people I have worked with, we've got them coverage in like local, radio, podcast, TV, and having people come to me looking for interview requests. And basically, giving people, a good idea of, the power of leveraging free media publicity. I mean, it is certainly huge. And it's even more important now to leverage it because, with COVID, some businesses are really struggling and they need to get in front of their customers more. And it's harder to break into the news cycle because COVID is everywhere. So you're trying to link your business, your story into COVID, or, do the opposite and have a positive news angle. I did this during COVID. You'll see a lot of those stories if you're keeping an eye on any publications. There are people, I lost like 20 pounds during COVID, or I gained 20 pounds during COVID, and now I need to go on a major diet to change the error of my ways. So the power of leveraging free media publicity is huge. And I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of that. Okay. So I suppose the one thing I want you to get from this, most of all, more than anything, is that I know some of you here may have already, pitched to the press and haven't gotten any response, but it is possible to turn that around. And any of you that haven't started, it is possible to do this. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. And that is one thing I do tell people who come to work with me. This is not a case of, landing in the BBC or the Guardian next week. Now, you've got to put some groundwork in, and I'm going to deal with that a little bit later. But the one thing I want you to really, really know is that this is possible for you. And stories, to be story driven is, to try and keep that in the foremost of your mind. Okay, so I want to just deal with 3 beliefs you may already have, and I'm going to go on to the tips later. But I actually kind of feel these are kind of tips as well, in a way. So these might be beliefs you may or may not already have about media publicity and the whole world of the media. So you may feel that you need to get big named titles to cover your story, and that you're going to bypass, the local outlets that may only have like a 5K circulation or a 10K circulation. And you may think, well, look at, I don't really want to pitch to them. I want to go to the bigger online publications. Now, obviously, a lot of the locals have an online presence as well. But you're thinking, I don't want to go there. I want to go to the Irish Independent, the Irish Times, the Guardian, the Daily Telegraph. And you want to pitch to them. And that's all well and dandy. But I'm going to share with you a story that that will certainly help you to concentrate your efforts more on your own local area first. Now, my very, very, very first story was about a bakery in Athenry. Now, you may have heard of these, actually, the Foods of Athenry. And I had no experience as a journalist, but I needed to get into a course, and I needed to have articles published. And I saw that they were opening a bakery. Now, they have rebranded recently. I don't want to go into the backstory, but they've rebranded, and it was called the Fields of Athenry when I was dealing with them. Anyhow, but I said, look, I can pitch your story to the local newspaper. And they were kind of looking at me going, oh, what's she on about? Like, who's this young one after walking in, telling us that, she wants to be a journalist and she wants to write our story. So they said, look, Sandra, come back to us next week and we'll talk. Now, the main reason I targeted them was that they were doing novelty cakes. And back in like the early 2000s, late 90s, certainly in Athenry, I don't know about where you are, but novelty cakes were not, they weren't a big thing. I'm talking cakes like that are castles and, really intricate work, like amazing work. And I knew that was going to be photogenic. And I knew exactly where I wanted to send the story into. And I had done the groundwork on that, which is actually really important to do. You need to know where your story fits in, and you can only really do that by knowing the outlets and the journalists that you are pitching to. So we started, to cut a long story short, because it is quite a long story, and I don't want to kind of go into all the ins and outs. We started locally, and we built a relationship with a local journalist who covers lifestyle and who covers, like quirky stories. And we built a relationship with her. She covered the story, and then she covered another one, and then she covered another one. And then they made this absolutely brilliant cake for an event, and they sent in a photo, and it landed on the front page. And it was an amazing photo. And just a little story underneath the caption, that was it. That caught the attention of the nationals, and then they went on to do radio, they went on to do television, and they've been brought on as experts on at various different times of the year, like Halloween, Christmas, to talk about and to offer tips to people who are like baking their Christmas pudding or want to bake cakes. And their story really spiraled, but they started locally. And if you are, trying to pitch directly to the Irish Independent, for example, they're going to want to see, have you been covered anywhere else? Like, have you been covered in your local newspaper? Do you have some clippings? And, having these clippings to show them that another journalist was interested in your story does help massively when you want to go to the next level and you have a story that you feel the nationals would be interested in. Okay, so you may think, and sometimes people come to me and say, look, Sandra, I can't go and talk to a journalist, or I can't send a story into a journalist because I'm not a good writer. And I'm like, okay, hang on a second. You don't need to be a great writer. What you really need to be able to do is put your ideas down in a logical format, and starting with the most important thing that's in your content. And put that down first, and then logically add the rest. Now, I used to get like press releases that were 1,000 words long, and I hadn't a bloody clue what I was supposed to do with this. And I'd read the whole thing, and then I might even read it again. And to be honest, you're kind of thinking, I don't even know what to do with this. And for me, sometimes, if I even got bullet points with, this is what we're doing, Sandra, and at the very end have a telephone number or an email, that's better than having 1,000 words of just rambling thoughts that don't have a hook and that don't have anything that I can grab onto. So remember too, it's the journalist that's going to be writing the story at the end of the day. You just need to give them your details, starting with the main point of your story, like the hook, the thing that's going to attract their attention, and then give them the rest in a logical format, and make sure to put your contact details at the end. And that really is, the best way I think you can do it. It doesn't have to be really, really hard. Okay. Now my screen share is still okay. Good. Story needs to be about me because I need the publicity for my business. And sometimes, like in local journalism, certainly they write a lot of stories about, like a business launch or a business opening, a business premises opening. But when you're going back to get publicity and it's still all about you and you and you, then that's not, it's not newsworthy. That, the story shouldn't really be all about you all the time. It should be about like helping, you take you out of the picture and you put in, the reader, the person that you're trying to help, the listener, the viewer, and put them in there instead. Because at the end of the day, journalists are only interested in keeping readers entertained, educating readers, and providing good quality content. And that, I'm afraid, does not constitute an advertorial about your business. So this is a recent client of mine, Jerry Toledo, and he came to me with his content, and we went through it. And he's a leadership coach, and he works a lot with CEOs on how to get them to better communicate with their employees. So we worked together on his content, and we refocused it, looking at the content from the view of the person that they were helping, instead of it being all about Jerry and what Jerry does. We did have some of that as well, but the news hook was about how what he does helps other people, and that is what is getting him attention right now for his upcoming book. So this is just a quote about how myself and Jerry worked together, and he is, working on rewriting a lot of his content now on his website, and turning the focus away from him and putting it more on the people he helps and the results that he gets for people. And you can reframe this a lot to just take, okay, so your stories matter. And I find that when people go to talk to journalists, they're kind of like, okay, I'm a little bit, I'm not very confident. I've already emailed them. I don't really know what to do next. But when you go into doing your own media publicity, just to keep this in your mind all the time, your story matters. And when you go in with that mindset, your things really, really do change, because you know the importance of your story. And you're going to keep that in the forefront of your mind when you are going to pitch it. Okay, so now I'm going to get on to the 5 tips that I feel will give you a better chance next time you go to send in your story. Own shop window. Because when you send in your story, and sometimes things can happen really fast, you send in your press release and the journalist is going, oh, I really like this story. Excuse me. I'm going to go to their website and I'm going to go to their social media and I'm going to see, what they're about on there. That is the first thing they're going to do. So if your website is not optimized for mobile, because some journalists will be checking their emails on the move, going to events, waiting for events to start, waiting for Zoom calls, waiting for interviews. So they'll be still checking their email. And if they go to your website and your website isn't optimized for mobile, that's going to be a little bit off-putting. They'll be like, okay, maybe I'll get back to that later. But they actually probably will never get back to it because you had your one chance to get them into your website and it didn't, they couldn't get in. They couldn't see what they wanted to see. And your social media, like if you are sending in a story that is potentially controversial, the first thing the journalist is going to do is going to check you out on your website, and they're going to look at your social media. And they're going to think, okay, they've not really been controversial on their social media, so I'm not really sure if this person is going to be able to deal with, the huge amount of comments that's going to happen once we print their story. And same goes for, if you're pitching for a television slot and the researcher is going to go and look at your social media profile and you've never done a Facebook Live, you've never done any kind of video. Now, it doesn't have to be slick. It doesn't have to be anything like that. It just to help them book you for the slot. So you can be able to show them that, yeah, look, I'm pretty confident on camera. I can talk without, without like making huge amounts of mistakes. And it just kind of plants in their head that, yeah, okay, I will get back to that person. And look at your website and your social media from a neutral point of view, or get somebody that doesn't know anything about what you do to look at your social media and just give you an honest opinion about what it's like and how they, and then tell that person, well, look, I'm actually pitching this story. Do you think if the journalist opened my email, would they get a decent sense of me then when they go to my website and see my social media? And the two really should, have some links there. So that's tip 1. Now, tip 2 is really important. And when I worked as a journalist, my God, the amount of times I heard, this is the best ever story, Sandra, you are going to do in your whole career. This is the longest ever running event. Now, that one sometimes can be true. Or this is the trendiest ever jacket. Or this is just the most fabulous event. We'd love you to come. Journalists get this all the time, and it's not what they want to hear. They want to hear what's the news angle. Yeah, it's the best ever, but how do you actually quantify that at all? And language that's full of hype, especially using it on the subject line, sometimes that is so off-putting that it's an instant delete and your email doesn't even get opened. So like, just forget the best ever, the most fantastic, open this now, because they know that what a journalist wants to see most, especially in your subject line and in your email, is what your story is about. And then later on, they can decide, or the public will decide, God, that was the best ever event. It's not really for you to state that up front. And now this brings us on to the email subject line. Now, I said earlier that journalists get like an insane amount of emails all the time. And what's the first thing that you do when you open your email in the morning? You want to delete the emails that you do not want, and you want to keep the ones that you need. And a journalist is exactly the same. They're going through their emails and they're going delete, 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 star, delete, 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 star. And sometimes they're just looking at the subject line. So what my tip for you is to use your subject line in your press release, in your pitch email as your subject line. Like, there's no need for things like press release, or I've got a story for you, or you need to open this now. There's no need for any of that, because the journalist already knows you want them to do something. You want them to do something with your content. So you using your headline as your subject line in your email goes a lot further than press release, I have a story for you, please open. So like, I've given just a couple of simple examples here. So signpost your content, like startup tips from a 6-figure coach, wrist exercises to do at your laptop, say from an ergonomics specialist, improve your communication skills on Zoom, and you would have someone lined up to give tips about that. And straight away, if you have done your homework and you know the journalist that you're pitching to, they'll be already going, oh God, this person knows what they're doing. Because yes, I write a lot about startups. I write a lot about like health and fitness and how to stay healthy working at your desk all day. And just target it better. And it's a coveted space on your subject line. And I encourage people to really use it really, really well. And just one little note that I want you to be really, I suppose, careful with is using the words breaking news in your subject line. Breaking news is you've just won the lotto and you want to talk about it, for example. You've just witnessed a shooting on the main street. There's a car crash. There's been a terrorist attack. That's breaking news because it is massive news. But what a pet peeve of mine when I used to work as a journalist was you get breaking news and you're instantly in there to open it. And you're brought to like, oh yeah, my art exhibition is opening next month. Do you want to come along? And I'm like, that's not breaking news. And it's just something to keep in mind. And definitely when you're pitching, it is a case of, you want to keep the journalist on side and using breaking news to get their attention, and then you're telling them something that's not happening now. It's a surefire way to, not build a great relationship from the get-go. Okay, so tip 4, whether to send a press release or a pitch email. Now, I suppose to bear in mind now, journalists are under, they're under huge pressure. And now with COVID, many journalists are not covering what they used to cover. And they are, they're covering different areas, in relation to COVID, because COVID is everywhere. But what to pitch? So I've just made a couple of pointers here in relation to which one works best in which situation. So for me, local newspapers, really like press releases. And with resources nowadays in local newspapers, getting smaller and smaller, having a good press release put together, as I said earlier, in a logical format, with your hook at the start is definitely the way to go. Now, nationals do like press releases as well, but just expect to, need to give them maybe some further information because they might want to take a different angle on what you've sent in. And I think for a press release, 500 words max is you should really be aiming, to get it either at 500 or coming in under 500 words. So I just have a stat there from Cision Media that they are a huge company that do a lot of surveys in relation to journalism and media. And they did a survey recently and they got this result that 36% of journalists still like to get press releases. And I think nowadays, because our journalists are under so much more pressure, that getting a good press release is really worth its weight in gold. But then there are times when a pitch email is a lot more appropriate. If you want to jump on a story that's trending and you feel that you could pitch to a radio station or a television station, then the pitch email is the way to go. And this is, 200 words. It's in the body of the email. There is no attachments. It's pretty much, there's no need to go, hi, Sandra, how are you? Hope you're having a lovely day. Are you getting ready for Christmas? All this kind of stuff. No, just don't even go there. Get straight into the point of, this is what your story is. This is what you want the journalist to do. And this is where they can get more information. Normally, a pitch email is like 4 paragraphs tops, and you have links in there that they can go to. And this works really well for television and radio, because television journalists and researchers don't really sometimes have time to read 500 words. But if they're looking to do a story about you and they get it in 4 paragraphs, then they'll be like, yes, this is good. I can work with this. So whilst press release does work well in all situations, if you're trying to like jump on a trending story, then certainly the pitch email works better in that regard, because the journalist will call you to get more information and will set up an interview. But just a word of warning in relation to sending in the pitch email. If you're sending in and you're jumping on a trending story, you need to be ready to go the minute you send the email. You know, I worked with someone before and they sent in a really good pitch email and then they went on holidays because they just thought, well, I probably won't get a response. But they were trying to give their, they were trying to jump on a trending story. And if you were doing that and you send in a pitch email, then you need to be ready to go pretty much instantly, because the television journalist or researcher is going to be looking through their emails going, oh my God, this is a story that's related to a story that is running now. And they'll be like, straight away, pick up the phone and let's organize to have this person in. Or obviously before they organize that, they'll be wanting to get a better sense of you. So the follow-up etiquette. Now, when I was putting these slides together, I have so many memories of how people follow up when they send in their details. And lots of very funny ones, and used to spend lots of time kind of going, why were they like that on the call with me? But these are a couple of things that, you know, I'd like you to keep in mind when you do follow up. Now, you know, things do fall off people's lists. And nowadays, you know, if you've got 200-300 emails coming in, you know, things are going to get missed. But the one thing that I really urge you to do is to give yourself enough time to get featured in the first place. Like, don't be going to the journalist with like 2 days ahead of your launch going, oh my God, can you do something with this? Now, if you've built up a very good relationship with that journalist, you may be okay. But if you are cold pitching, then you should at least give yourself 3 to 4 weeks to do this. So then you have, let's say if it's a weekly newspaper, you have 3 goes to try and get in there. And it actually takes a lot of the stress out of it if you give yourself enough time to do it. So if you give yourself enough time, you're already going, well, I've got three goes at this. So surely at some point, you know, they will find space to do my story, or they'll find a link to do my story. So first tip, leave yourself enough time and take the stress out of it straight away. So email first. You're going to be emailing in your story. But then when you go to follow up, I recommend, it depends on, you know, how much time you give yourself. But, you know, 4 to 5 days after you send the initial first email, you know, to send another email, but have the original email included. And just be like, you know, hey, you know, I'm just getting back to you about this. Do you need any more information? I'm happy to provide any information. Our event is coming up on whatever date it is, and just a very gentle reminder. And then if you still don't hear back and you're thinking, okay, I think I need to call now, pick up the phone and ask to speak to the journalist that you've sent the content to. And my very first thing that you shouldn't say is, did you get my press release? And this is what I used to get all the time. And I'm like, I get 300 of them. You know, which press release is it? You're better off to say, hey, you know, I'm Sean, I'm with certain company, and, you know, I have a story based on this, and this is how it helps people in this space. You know, I'm just wondering, did you get a chance to see it? Do you need me to give you any more information? You know, I'm happy to provide another angle, or, you know, our CEO is ready to be interviewed if that's of any interest. And you're kind of coming at it with, you know, I have other things I can give you. And you're not being like all defensive going, well, did you get my press release? You know, why aren't you doing something with it? You're like, okay, look, you are still asking if they got your press release, but you're offering them other things like, okay, I have another interview if you're interested in that. You know, I have other images. We've got new images taken. You know, I can send you a link to those if that's of any help. So just not to start with, hi, Sandra, did you get my press release? You know, that's straight away I'm like, okay, which press releases? And then we're scrolling down through press releases. Instead of having a conversation about how your story is different, you've got the journalist on the phone now. And, it's time for you to give them a little taste of your personality and to build a relationship. So the journalist will be like, oh God, I really enjoyed talking to Sean. He gave me a lot of really good, useful information. Where is that press release? So that is the kind of vibe, I suppose, you want to give off. And sometimes people go in with, okay, did you get my press release? And then they get the answer of, well, actually, yes, I did. And I have it earmarked for a supplement we're doing in that area next month. And I was actually about to get on to you about it. And sometimes you can be like, oh my God, great. They were going to do something about it. And you kind of, I suppose, you have the relief now that they're definitely going to be back in touch with you to do it. But my biggest tip in relation to following up is just to give yourself enough time in the first place. So then you never have this feeling of, rushing and the stress that comes with it, especially if you really, really need to get publicity for your event or your book launch or your business or whatever it is. So I should have said earlier that I am happy to answer questions. Now, I think there is one here, which I will get to in a second. I'll just carry on here for the moment. Let me see what's happening. Anyway, it's good to take a bit of a breather because I'm sure some of this is quite a heavy duty going, maybe for some of you, especially some of you that have never pitched a journalist at all. So I just want to give you just a couple of more. Is definitely something you should try to do. And when you go to email a journalist and the journalist can see that you've given them loads of time to do the story. It works both ways. You have the time, they have the time. And it's like, oh, great, this person, has built in a good window of time for me to do this. And I don't feel like, I'm under huge pressure to do this story. So you'll see here that 41% of journalists surveyed, and I think they surveyed about 5,000. They plan their stories daily or more frequently. Now, 42% of them plan a week to a month ahead. And this is very common. Certainly in major magazines, you will find that pitching to them, you need to be pitching a good month in advance. So as I said already, I don't belabor the point. Just give yourself lots of time. So now, what are the elements of a story? And I don't want to kind of go into the ins and outs of press releases and all that because we don't really have time for that now. But just a couple of things here that I hope is going to help you. A press release that is an advert for you, and we talked about this earlier, if it's all about you and your sales and everything is very you focused, that's very much an advertorial for you, and it's not a story. It's not a story that your regular reader is going to be interested in. So what I encourage you to do when you're putting your story together is that see how does my service and my product help people, or how has it helped people in the past? Success stories that you could share. Have you got a person who has used your service or product and they are willing to be quoted in your press release? And that is really gold if you can get that. Being relevant, like hopping on a trending story. And this is a very good tip if you are starting off completely from scratch doing your own media publicity, is if you're keeping an eye on news trends and what's happening around you, you are more likely to see trends in how you can become relevant and get in on the news agenda. We call it news jacking in the business, if you want to put it that way. But it's a very good way to get started, is to get in on a story that's already there, or if you notice in your local area that a major story has broken and you think, yeah, actually I have something to say about that, then the following week you get your press release together, maybe with some quotes from someone that you've helped already, and you send it in. You're kind of keeping the conversation about that story going, and the journalist will like that more, because keeping a very newsy story going helps them, and it keeps readers in the loop, because readers always want to know, oh, what happened there? Whatever happened to that person who was doing that? So hopping on a trending story is a very good way to start. Be entertaining or educational. When you start off first, you need to think about, am I going to be funny in this press release, or am I going to try and educate people about something maybe that they don't know about? To try and think in your mind first, what sense you want to give off, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Transformational. And this can be a client of yours who had a major transformation from working with you. And you make it mainly about the person that you've helped. And you will get publicity through, that person's story. So basically what I'm trying to say here is, when you help the audience that's going to be reading, listening, or watching, then that is the best way that you help the journalist, because they only have their subscribers and readers and listeners and viewers in mind at all times. Okay, so I just have a couple of more slides. What do journalists want? Is the question I get asked all the time. And it's very hard to squeeze it into a couple of slides, but this is a couple of pointers that I'd like you to take away. Email obviously is hugely important nowadays, and we've gone through a little bit about that. And that email is the best way to contact them initially. And then, you do your whole follow-up process with the second email, and then maybe go for the phone call. So what journalists really want is the next good story. And they want to be the person to write that story and to be in the center of a talking point about a story. And they're not out to trick you. And I had so many people that were like, oh, journalists, you can't trust them. They're going to do something wild with what I send in. But that isn't, I can't say it's not always the case, but in general, it is the case. They're not out to majorly trick you. And if you get your content together in a logical format, then you're already kind of starting on a good foot. Nowadays, making experts available for video interviews with the social distancing is also a good thing to put in your email, that you have someone who is available to do a Zoom call. But I have sat in on a good few Zoom calls, and a lot of them are just like talking heads. So what I would encourage you to do is, if you are doing a Zoom call with the journalist, that you try to be a little bit more interactive, like, show them some slides, excuse me. If you have a product, maybe, demonstrate it. If you have a whiteboard in your office, you could go through pointers, something to kind of make it interesting, because journalists are doing these Zoom calls all the time now, all day. And they do get quite boring come 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. So just try and think how you can make it a little bit different for them. And, finding the local news angle, especially now with COVID and the different ways COVID is being managed in different areas. You need to do your research if you are pitching a COVID type story. Definitely you need to be aware of what's happening in that area. Now, the journalist will, inform you too, if they will get back to you and say, look, well, we can't really do that story because, social distancing. But you should be aware of that before you pitch it. But just to make sure you do a little bit of research first before you go to the bother of putting together all this content and then realizing that no one can use it. Positive stories, definitely nowadays with COVID, positive stories in relation to, any of your clients that have done something amazing, during lockdown. Because there are journalists now that, really could do with some, positive stories, and we could do with some positive stories, our readers and listeners too. And yeah, building in the time, I've said that already. Being patient. And you know what, if you can even be exercise a little bit of patience with the journalist I guarantee you it will be remembered. You know, people come and they're like, "Oh, did you get my press release?" And you're like, "Okay, hang on a second. I'm after spending a full day at Inquest pre-COVID in a courthouse. I covered a lot of quotes, and then I'd come back to the office and I'd be, the phone would be, like the light would be beeping on it, and it'd be like, "Did you get my press release?" And I'm like, just be patient and know a little bit about what your journalist's day is like. Like, you should know if the journalist you're pitching covers sport, for example, or do they cover courts? Do they cover a lot of hard news? Are they out of the office a lot? Because if the journalist that you're pitching to covers courts, they'll be out of the office quite a lot during the week. So they'll only get your email maybe in the afternoon or evening, because journalists, certainly in local newspapers and regionals and nationals, they do courts, but they also do other things. So that's just an example. Okay. So we've come to the end of the training, and I'm happy to answer some questions. I must look, we've got 2. Oh, great. 6 weeks ago. Yes, definitely. Oh, great. Here they are. There is a database. Now, what I generally get people to do, I'm not sure where you are in relation to your media publicity, but there is a database that you can buy, and they're quite expensive. But what I encourage you to do if you're starting off is to build your own database. And certainly now with COVID, those databases may not be up to date, and they may be actually very much out of date, because journalists are being siphoned from what they normally do, and they go on to do, they're doing COVID stories now. There are places like Harrow. I don't know if you've heard of them. I can certainly email you some more details about it, but there is databases, but I'd be very wary of paying a lot of money for them right now. I would encourage you to start locally and build your own database from the people that work in newspapers around you, and keep an eye on that and start there. And when you do, I suppose, want to go to pitch to the bigger ones, then maybe, yes, you could maybe get a database. But I'd certainly encourage you not to buy one just now until things with COVID all kind of die down a little bit and journalists are back doing what they normally do. The best places to see what's actually trending is actually Google. Google, Jessica. Hi, Jessica. Google is definitely excellent if you type in your subject. But actually the best place to see what is trending and what journalists are talking about mostly is Twitter. And Twitter is the best place to find journalists, find what they write about, and actually even find their emails. So sometimes maybe if you're not on Twitter, that is also a very good place to be. Because a lot of journalists will tweet out and say, look, I'm interested in getting stories about this. Is anyone out there that would like to send me in a press release about this? I'm really interested. And then you get in there with the tweet and you start to build a relationship with them. So great, they're 2 excellent questions. I hope I've answered them for you. I'm just going to X that out. Okay, so I had a piece, this is Sandra, I had a piece published today in the UK Metro Reviews. 6 weeks, yeah. Certainly it can take that long. I mean, some major magazines, they're 3 months out. But if you're looking at starting, locally, regionally, and nationally, then it can 3 to 4 weeks is normally good enough. But I guess 6 weeks. 6 weeks definitely. It can take longer. I suppose with COVID now, things are taking a little bit longer too. Can you email sample of a pitch email to TV? Okay. Yes, TV journalists certainly do like pitch emails the most. Now they're not, it's easier for them to get a sense of whether the story is for them or not, and whether they can get it together for a bulletin that they're working on that evening or the next day. I read an excellent book actually a few months ago about a television journalist, and he was often working right up to the deadline for pieces to camera, and he would look at all the different press releases and pitch emails that were coming in, and the ones that were the shortest worked the best because he just did not have time to read lots and lots. And I can certainly do another training on pitch emails another time, certainly, because they're a very different beast to the press release. The press release, you can go a little bit more, you've got more room to talk about, what you want to say, but the pitch email is definitely something that you need to get to the point, be very succinct, but also be ready to capitalize once you're contacted. Let's see. Okay. Not necessarily. Okay, we have a question here. Oh yes, STIRFs definitely Assumpta. Working with GPs, solicitors are the same. Anyone kind of working in, I suppose, a kind of a more sensitive subject matter, you've got to be very careful, of course. But you would be surprised sometimes journalists get stories, get content in, and they know straight away, I can't print that. Sometimes people send in stories and they're talking about the politicians, for example. But they're saying stuff you think, I can't go there. So definitely there is stuff that you need to be careful about. But I guarantee you the journalist is also being careful, even more careful about what they write. And definitely things that are sensitive are checked and double checked and triple checked before they go up online or are printed. Important to publications, journalists. Okay, contemporary art. So we have a question here. Do you think that trending topics are relevant or important to publications, journalists in all sectors are working contemporary art? It definitely helps if you have noticed a trend in your sector and you can hop on it. But if you are looking for coverage, then if you have a relationship with a certain number of publications in your field and you can pitch the content in a way that makes it that little bit more newsy, then it definitely does help. But I don't think you need to jump on a trending topic and try and link into it if there isn't any link, because the journalist will see that that's, that you're trying to get in on a topic that doesn't relate to what you do. But if you can, I suppose, keep an eye on trends. I covered some art stories way back at the early days of my career, and oftentimes some of them would make news stories, and mainly they made news stories as well as stories, say, in the entertainment section. But they spoke out about a topic in arts funding, say, for example, or they had something to say about there's a new minister appointed, and they're like, okay, or they want funding for a certain area in their field, then you can certainly transition out from the area. You're more of a news story, and you actually appeal to more people. That way, more people read about the exhibition, more people read about the artist. So I hope that's answered that a little bit, Saskia, without going to close down this window. So I really hope that that was helpful to you. And I just want to tell you now a little bit about how you can work with me if this is something that you would like to do more of, and to really, I suppose, hone your skills in relation to this. So media publicity for Christmas and New Year. This is actually going to be really massive this year, because we're worried about where am I actually going to get my stories now, because there are so many of the regular news sources are closed, and our Christmas and New Year stories early this year. So I am doing a training actually on the 1st of December, and why I've decided to do that is December is one of the advance when they pitched, but for Christmas and New Year, December is when journalists knuckle down and work out their plans for Christmas week and New Year week. And yes, they will have got pitches already, but this is when they actually really choose for Christmas and New Year. What are the stories that we have, and how are we going to get them together? What are our front page images going to be? What's our, they start to look at this, and things will not be set in stone until coming up closer to Christmas. So this is going to do this class. So anyone that is on a if you'd like me to give this training at a different time, I'm going to be doing it at 9:30 in the morning to 11, so it's going to be an hour and a half. So this class is going to be, how do you communicate with the media this Christmas? This Christmas is going to be a COVID Christmas, so it's going to be very, very. I'm going to do a live press release edit, so you can see I'm going to have a press release and I'm going to work on it live in the class. So it's 30 you learn. So you're going to learn about the language to use in your communication this Christmas, the types of stories that you should be pitching, and how to pitch them, and how to get your content together so that you will appeal to journalists for Christmas and New Year. And I always say that Christmas and New Year is the best time to actually, if you're new to media publicity, Christmas and New Year are the best time to actually start building relationships, because journalists are looking for good stories to keep their readers entertained while they're on holidays. So they are looking for really good stories. So I'm going to help you find the stories that you should be pitching, and I'm going to give you some examples of what's worked before and what I feel will work now, and why your imagery, why you should really for happy images. They're looking for positive images around Christmas, and they want to feel like yeah, let's get into the Christmas spirit. Did you read that story about X, Y, and Z? So your imagery at Christmas is really important. So this is what you're going to learn. So as I said, if you can help a journalist during Christmas, New Year, and now that we've got a pandemic on top of all of that, you are on your way to building a really, really strong relationship. So if you are hesitant about contacting a journalist, I encourage you to start getting your content together and getting ready to pitch over to them. You will already be setting yourself up for a really good 2021, because you'll have helped them during a time of Christmas when lots of things are not going to be. And as I said already, major news stories are planned for Christmas and New Year. And a lot of planning does happen before that, but long, long meetings about what we're going to do for Christmas and New Year. So this is really, I suppose, your chance to pitch to journalists at Christmas, because so many of the regular news sources have disappeared. Okay, so if you decide to join, you know, that has actually started to really emerge over the last few months. You know, if you're, been reading, online or physical copies, you'll see, a lot of journalists are honing in on more positive language. And for this training, I've looked back over, to any other, I suppose, major event that has happened. But we had 9/11. We've had other major pandemics, not as, dealt with this before. And I go deep into the language that works then and how journalists change their language in response to a major event. And COVID is no different, and their language has changed. As I said, it's the perfect time to build relationships with journalists. Your imagery is so, so important for Christmas. And, you should really think of your Christmas and New Year stories as, trying to help people navigate what is a really, really difficult time. And we don't even know if we can spend Christmas with our loved ones this year either. Hopefully, that will be eased for Christmas week, but we still don't know that. So, to give people positivity and hope, certainly going into 2021, when we all hope that COVID is going to be out of our, but we're hoping it's going to be on the way out of our lives next year. So it's €37, and this is what you're going to get in the class. So this link here, and I can pop it into the comments. This is the link to join. It's an Eventbrite, and I can email it all to you afterwards. And you can go there and check it out. Go there to register, and it's €37. And I'm going to do it in the morning, half 9, to 11. So that's it, you guys. Oh yes, I forgot. I have a Christmas present for the first 3 that sign up to the class. They are going to get a full press release edit from me. So the first 3 that get in there, I will get you to send me over, and you can start sending it out to media outlets, jury and relationship building. So that's it, you guys. Now I'm going to see if there are other questions. Of course, those of you that stay to the end, I will be sending this to you, which is the checklist for when you go to send your story. You can use it. Okay, so these are the details again. If you want to carry on this conversation with me, the first 3 who sign up will get a free press release edit. So that's something that you will be able to use, 1st December morning time now. I'm happy to answer any questions on that. And I just want to say a massive thank you to all of you who attended. And if you have any questions even after this training, I'm happy to answer them. If you just respond to any of the emails that you've gotten in relation to this training, I'll be able to get them there. Now, I just want to pop in. We have a couple of more questions. It's great to get questions. Okay, so Sandra says, excellent presentation and very relevant. Thank you very much. Sandra, it's so great to get feedback, because sometimes you do these trainings and you think, God, I hope people get something from this, because my biggest thrill, and always has been, is seeing people benefit from media publicity. Even when I worked as a journalist, you would do a story and you'd hear, like, a couple of months later, the person would ring, go, oh my God, Sandra, that story, it has really helped my business. No end. I've got, like, increased my visibility. I have a lot more new clients, and, it's given me confidence to pitch again. And so it's nothing actually thrills me more more than seeing people benefit from media publicity. It's a great feeling. So I just want to scroll down here a little bit to get to the next question. Yeah, a lot. Okay, this is a question from Sinead. Yes, a lot of the media are on Twitter. Some even invite direct contact in their bio and say that their DMs are open. Do you think it's acceptable? It depends. I think and interact a little bit with them first. And as I said very early on in the training, have your own Twitter organized and have it, maybe have your own email on there. So when they go to check your profile, and if they're interested in you, they actually might be the one emailing you first. But I don't recommend doing it straight off. I think, make a few connections first and then certainly go to pitch. But if they have tweeted out a story that you feel that you can give them information on, then by all means reply to that tweet and say, hey, I work in this area. I feel I can contribute to the story. And then they will take it off Twitter and either call you or email you. But certainly, yes, Twitter, if you're not on Twitter, it's definitely the place to be to find journalists and see what topics are trending. Okay, thanks for that question, Sinead. Okay, so I don't think I have any other questions. I think I've answered all of them. Yeah, I just want to make sure. Okay, so I think this is a slán for me, as they say, as Gaeilge in the Irish language. I am so happy that you guys have enjoyed the training, and I really hope you've got a lot of value from it. As I say, you can sign up to my next masterclass on pitching for media publicity in Christmas and New Year, and I'm happy to put that in the comments now. If you've got any questions about it, anything at all that you want me to answer, feel free to email me and I can provide more details. Okay, thank you